Welcome to my channel, The Magic of Java. This is my third book called The Londo and the Green Queen's Revenge. It's a novel. It's a novel about me coming to terms with the attempted destruction of an Englishman and his Javanese family. But it is a novel. Yes, it's based on experience. It's based on real people and celebrities, but amalgams of real people or caricatures of them. So if you do identify yourself, please forgive me, because it's only intended as a yarn. The Sexagenarian and the Red Queen. Maddie's karaoke machine was returned and she began singing Danduk again. She had been off the strong psychotropics for a fortnight, and slowly I was getting my Maddie back. Even her muscles and weight were beginning to go, and once more her fat looked sexy rather than simply fat. Like before, she now tries on a number of outfits each day, including frocks which she will probably never have another opportunity to wear. But we are both so happy again. I caught her out telling me a little white lie when I asked if she used to try to make Steve jealous of me, as I knew she tried with me. And I was so happy that even this little piece of Maddie has returned. A reflection of her recovery is that she spotted a photograph of Bulan on his WhatsApp profile and called it, despite knowing that he died of AIDS some 4 months ago. His brother from Makassar answered, as he now has Bulan's phone. Yes, Mawar had a little cry when she was talking to the brother, but she now had the courage and confidence to call the number. Actually, Mawar's weight kept going up and down, as it always had, but hovering around fat rather than sexy. Some 5 years ago, we'd bought some apicite for her, and it seemed to take away her unwanted weight very quickly. So I was delighted when I found it to still be available in Indonesia. I warned Mawar that she should not take it for too long, nor use it too often, and that she was to take it in the morning. But for some reason, Mawar insisted in taking the apicite each afternoon, and my wide-eyed wife would lie in bed at night explaining to me how much she enjoyed shopping in Pim. For many hours she'd repeat to me how to find the shops selling Bebe and Guest, including which section of the mall, which floor, which shops they were next to, the fascias of the shops and the names of the assistants. Which sections of the mall, which floor, which shops they were next to, the fascias of the shops and the names of the assistants. Which sections of the mall, which floor, which shops they were next to, the fascias of the shops and the names of the assistants. I, for one, found it to be marvellously soporific. Unfortunately, Mawar wasn't keen on the smell of apicite, and they were eventually replaced by Duramin, but she still seemed to want to discuss shopping malls rather than Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, as I recall, called Duramin inducing. Despite knowing that Mawar was getting better every day, I was surprised when she asked if she could go to Solo. Not 8 months previously, she had cursed Solo, its dynasty and inhabitants, in ancient Javanese. From what I could understand, she'd sent unremitting rainfall to the city, which resulted in flooding and its eventual destruction. When Mawar believed that she was Nera Rorokidal, she associated Solo with her nemesis Nera Blorong, and even as Mawar blamed Nera Blorong for her ill health and misfortune. Nera Blorong's colour is red, and for around a week in our home we had to remove all red objects, or Mawar would grab them and throw them out of the door in hysterics. So now asking to visit Solo was surely a sign that she was nearly back to normal. It was my 60th birthday in 10 days' time, and I suggested that we go on my birthday. In fact, I was not looking forward to spending the day at home as we had for Christmas in the New Year, and going to Solo seemed perfect as neither of us had really visited the city before. Mawar wanted to visit Pasar Klewer, one of the largest markets in Indonesia, whilst I wanted to see Pasar Klewer, supposedly one of the cheapest places for batik, Pasar Triwindu, the antiques market, although I knew few would be genuine, and the Kraton, spelt keratin in Solo. We could also visit a supermarket to buy some bread, cooked meats, seafood, and if we were very lucky, some olives. Above all, Solo would be a welcome refrain from Jogja, which although we love, we visit so often. No sooner had I agreed to go than I heard Yanni would be joining us. We had not seen much of her since she moved back to her home behind ours, as she had a young baby to care for, so I was happy that she would join us. However, I knew that everyone would come for the free ride, with me expected to pay for the car, and if I wasn't careful, I would have to buy lunch for everyone. Later, Mawar said that she wanted to buy a batik dress to attend Widati's graduation, and I explained that she would probably find Pasar Klewer better than Pasar Klewer. But as Yanni pointed out, everything is close by in Solo, so unlike Jakarta. Now Mawar wanting a dress for Widati's graduation is a massive sign that she is recovering, as the graduation is in Jakarta. A city only a month ago she would claim that she would never visit again. I really am overjoyed that Maddie is coming back, and after 12 months we can be a happily married couple again and say goodbye to the 2 years of incredible disruption to our lives caused by black magic. I have a friend from Manchester called Ajaz, who visited Maddie and I in Jakarta. I should explain that Ajaz is British and was born in Manchester, but is what an Indonesian would call Pakistani. He is very active at Manchester Central Mosque and devotes the whole of Ramadan to good causes. When he visited us, neither of us were particularly devout nor serious Muslims, and he took it upon himself to teach me about Islam. Now, whilst I normally shun such evangelism, at this time I was an empty vessel. He explained to me that Allah had sent Maddie to me to give me one last chance. As events have unfolded, this comment seemed to be becoming more and more profound. Maddie is all love, made of love. She needs so much love and has so much love to give. Was Maddie sent to me because I had made a mess of my relationship with my former partner and my relationship with my schizophrenic son? If so, then yes, I had made a mess of things, but Allah realised that my intentions were honest. It was simply that I was not strong enough. This would also mean that our problems had been sent so that I should understand this, not simply enjoy the end of the distress of being with my partner and enjoy Maddie's love. It was not a holiday, but as Ajaz had said, a final chance. I kept repeating that I was not strong enough, but for those of you who know me would see it this way, especially my son Branwell. You see, I can be headstrong and determined and even resilient when pushed off course. But the combination of 20 years of manipulation and abuse by my former partner, the end of my business, effectively my working life, and Branwell's schizophrenia was too much for me. Indeed, I speculate that my normally optimistic nature acts as a cathode to those who are troubled and pessimistic. But 20 years with my depressive partner took the shine and attraction off my cathode, and with it its ability to attract. My normal resilience was nowhere to be found, and I sank into the darkest of places I have ever been. Mawar's psychological trauma forced me to take responsibility to look after her, and in doing so, I also slowly recovered. So were these terrible circumstances we've been through over the last year necessary for me to regain my life and desire for life? All these circumstances started to come to a head when I reached 50. You may see this simply as a midlife crisis. And yes, it was. But only if you realise that the midlife crisis is the beginning of the second half of your life. I knew that my then partner was not my soulmate. But more than this, I could not face the second, more reflected half of my life with her. I was certainly not looking for Mawar, and she would not have been the sort of woman I would sought had I been looking. But Allah knew better. Mawar was exactly what I needed, both then and for the rest of my life. Madian and I now approached the second half of our lives very different people, devoted to Allah and with a tolerance others mistake as weakness. Neither of us can completely leave the world we have known, and we are excited by the prospect of shopping in Solo. But make no mistake, we are very different people to 2 years ago. But I thank Allah that Made is now so different to how she was some 9 years ago. Yes, Mawar is Made once more. Yanni's baby was ill and she was unable to join us on our trip to Solo. Her place was taken by Mas Perwez's life, who had been very kind towards Mawar when she was at her worst. And on my 60th birthday, we set off for Solo on a route we'd never taken before, as previously we'd been through on one of Cecilio's circuitous routes. No sooner had we left Chandy and we were in Chawas, Java Tengah, and officially part of Greater Solo, but clearly still the hinterlands of Gunung Kidul. Slowly, however, commercial agriculture was apparent, and hence the Desa became much more prosperous, until finally we came to rice paddy. Even during the dry season, enough water ran off from Gunung Kidul to irrigate the paddy. Amidst the paddy, factories started to appear as the paddy gave way to an industrial area. When Cecilio had taken us to Jemba, we'd passed through Sukoharjo, and I had been impressed at how clean and modern it appeared. I was therefore surprised when we crossed a bridge and we were in that part of Sukoharjo, less than a kilometre from the scruffy industrial area. Very little time passed and we were driving through Solo's Kraton. The Solo spelling for Kraton. The Sultan of Solo is still important, but is now simply an honorary title, unlike the Sultan of Jogja. And this was obvious. The Kraton was nothing like the majesty of that in Jogja. On my first visit to Jogja, it was not apparent to me that Kraton was the centre of Javanese mysticism. Well, in Solo, it would hard to believe that this collection of narrow streets and high walls on either side hide any mystery at all. Maybe there was a little magic, as no sooner that we were there, we were out of these narrow streets, and there we were at Pasar Klewer. So despite being about the same distance as Jogja, and the roads not as good, the lack of traffic made getting to Solo quicker. I had to say that Pasar Klewer was a major disappointment. The batik for sale was of reasonable quality, but all the same, and all from in and around Solo. There was no batik from Pekalongan, nor even Jogja. I was anticipating that Pasar Klewer would be incredibly cheap, but far from it. It was much more expensive than in Jogja, even Jakarta. Indeed, when compared to Jogja, we found Solo to be expensive. Despite the lack of choice available, Made bought many batik dresses and tops, and after the spending spree, Mawar was fully cured and really did become Maddie again. You will be forgiven in thinking that my wife is shallow, but not at all. Having spent some 18 months completely engrossed by pessimism and paranoia, spending money to look nice, something she could never contemplate as a child, was the ultimate final tonic for Mawar. Outside Pasar Klewer is a large masjid, Angun, with a wonderful teak roof, and I was a little surprised to find few worshippers in petches, and I was the only one I saw in a copia. So unlike Claton, which is really a part of Solo, the people did not seem to outwardly show their faith. I ate satay kambing, goat satay, by the masjid, which Paerte from Made's Cost had recommended. Yes, it was quite good, but like everything else, not a reason for visiting Solo. There was some very good batik shops in Kampung Batik, down some gangs at the front of Pasar Klewer, but the prices were very high indeed. Indeed, we visited a warehouse of handmade batiks where the prices were astronomical. Now, one would be forgiven for thinking that this was simply for the tourists, but unlike nearby Jogja, there are no tourists and frankly little reason for tourists to visit Solo. When Jokowi was mayor of Solo, he had organised the parking, and it was better than in any city I have been to in Indonesia, including marked parking bays at the side of the street. The other big initiative from Jokowi was Pasar Terindu Antiques Market, and it was quite impressive. Like Jalan Surabaya in Jakarta, little in Pasar Terindu could be authenticated as genuine antique. Unlike Jalan Surabaya, everything was Javanese, with no tribal art from the far-flung parts of Indonesia, but a good section of genuine architectural and mechanical items. Nevertheless, I rather liked Pasar Terindu and bought a few items for resale via Patrick. Unlike Pasar Beringharjo in Jogja, there were few Jimat and black magic objects for sale in Solo. True, there were some brass depictions of Nira Blorong in a half-snake form, but Solo was far from the centre of dark mysticism it had become in my mind. Nor was it raining, and there was no sign of the flooding my wife had sent to the city, which she believed when she was near Rorokidal. After Pasar Terindu, we went in search for a supermarket. At first unsuccessfully, but after some driving we came across a lotte, where we bought so many things unavailable in Gunung Kidul, and indeed no longer available in Carrefour, even in Jakarta now. Whilst somewhat unimpressed by Solo, it was a lovely day. In fact, Solo has been tipped as the next big tourism destination. You see, Indonesians are very good at hyping things, without realising that if they hype a destination which doesn't deliver, then there will be no tourists returning. This sums up business in Indonesia. Everything is about a one-off sting, and there is no consideration of long-term relationships. But the most important thing for me was that on my 60th birthday, I got my wife back. She had not been herself for some 18 months, maybe 2 years. For the last 9 months, I had been worried that I'd lost my wife forever. This was the greatest present any man could wish for on his 60th birthday. Needless to say, there was no message of greeting from Branwell. In fact, I've not heard from him in over 3 weeks, which I suppose is a blessing that he's not demanding money backed up by threats of suicide. Eventually I was contacted by his team asking if I was prepared to pay for a deposit for a flat for him, which I am, but I'm in no position to pay the rent and cover his living costs. I guess time will tell. The day I was leaving for Jakarta, Branwell sent a short message asking for money, which I sent. Nor did I get a bus pass from Manchester City Council, despite the City Council having demanded my attendance at the Magistrates' Court for non-payment of council tax, and did not repay me my overpayment. It's such a shame. I was really looking to a bus pass. Maybe bus trips to Buxton are now out of the question, but it would have been nice to visit Runagiri by bus, albeit I'd have to walk for nearly an hour to get one. Whilst in Solo, a number of people wanted to wish me happy birthday, including Martin and Davina. Martin seems convinced that what we'd all written off as a long-term scam that had been trapped in for over a decade, maybe not a scam at all. He seems convinced that the funds are going to be released, but at his age he will have to revise his plans to something more manageable, and he's decided that it should focus on Jogja. As before, I'm included in his plans, which would be very gratifying indeed, especially as I discounted this ever happening many years ago. Then out of the blue, I was contacted by Rose from Vietnam, the lady who had effectively held me under house arrest in a hotel some 4 years previously. She wanted to buy coal from Indonesia and asked if I could help. Before I got caught up with one of Professor Darwin's associates selling Anglo-Irish building products, I'd been involved in the same exercise with a British national who now trades in coal, so of course I could. Have the opportunities been sent to test me on my birthday, to see if I'm interested for my own personal greed, or am I truly committed to building a masjid and retreat in my garden? The answer is yes to the latter, but I need to keep in check my desire to push the boundaries so that I personally benefit, such as, well, of course I need a car and a driver. But why would I? I'm binding with briars my joys and desires. William Brake, The Garden of Love. Even if my intentions are honourable, is my desire to leave something for a good life really just an arrogance based on the first half of my life and not seeking the physical advancement to which I am now dedicated? Surely using my talents for good is a good thing. Certainly both Martin's project and Rose's kept me occupied for years. But all I did was lose money on both. If things have really changed for me, is this me reaping the reward for work I had previously put in when nothing was coming to fruition? That this occurred on my 60th birthday may also be significant, as whilst I cannot trace my misfortunes and decline into pessimism back to my 50th birthday, it must have begun somewhere around then. This leads me to question if there's a 10-year cycle, and certainly I can retrace my life. It is possible to detect this cycle, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Martin and Davina were getting desperate for money and asked if I could help them out once more. But they must be so desperate, as the person who claims to have a project for Martin has taken their last bits of savings. I do hope that something comes from it, or they will be devastated. Maybe that is the reason why the truth is coming out now. Is it because I can now forgive and no longer bear a grudge? It also illustrates how since my second visit to Indonesia with Professor Darwin some 10 years ago, I have been tricked and double-crossed so many times by both Indonesians and British people. I know not who to trust. All along I've been careful with some and trusting with others, and those I have trusted have been the very people I should have been most careful with. This has not been helped by governments, banks and utility companies hardly being ethical in their business with citizens and customers, creating utter confusion within my poisoned mind. This would also explain why a previously successful British business person has wasted 10 years of his time and expenses chasing business in Indonesia, which was ephemeral. As always, I've been manipulated by dishonest expats. Now I must surround myself with happy, honest people and be content with the abundance of what the earth shares with me. I had already resolved to stop playing the game and simply to observe life, devoting the rest of mine to Allah. Were these new possibilities simply sent to re-engage me, to once more drain me of my life force and vibrancy? The day after the coal deal for Rose seemed to be going through, she also inquired about aviation fuel. My contact came back with an obvious scam from Russia. Was he simply being lazy in not checking out the company? Or is he not to be trusted? If it is the latter, it would mean that every business person I've ever had any association with in Indonesia has been fraudulent. No wonder Indonesians believe that all bullies are liars. But why are there so many dishonest expats in Indonesia? Well, the immigration policy and the rescinding of so many honest expats' work permits means that those are left are those who are the best at finding loopholes in the legislation. But there has to be more to it than this. Does Indonesia's reputation for sharp business practices attract the wrong type of expat? Probably. Does Indonesia's obvious wealth and lack of effective consumer protection, the Wild East, attract the wrong type of expat? Probably. But could it be that a country which sends out so many evil vibrations attracts more evil? Almost certainly. Or simply is it that cutting off a Westerner's ability to honestly earn a living in Indonesia, the only ones left are those who have found a way to make a living dishonestly? It probably comes as no surprise to you to hear about the popularity of pyramid selling, network marketing and Ponzi schemes in Indonesia. Almost everyone has a desire to get rich quick, and few have any concern about exploiting their family and friends. So many middle-class Indonesians supplement their official incomes selling products of dubious quality from Japan and the US in their spare time. Perhaps the biggest industry engaged in such practices is life insurance. Even reputable multinational insurance companies adopt a network marketing approach. They've developed effective sales networks and a reputation for not settling claims. You may find nothing unusual in this, but the whole industry and its practice is completely haram within Islam. I was about to recount how the coal deal with Rose fell through. Certainly the oil deal did. As I sat down to write Rose sent another message. My trading friend had never experienced anyone like Rose before and really had lost his patience. But there is another meaning to all these events. Rose wants me to return to Vietnam, and once my mind was wandering around the streets of Hanoi, Old Town, inevitably there would be much alcohol drunk, as business, particularly in northern Vietnam, is always conducted whilst drinking alcohol. Could I return and not drink, especially after Rose and his colleagues had expressed a hatred of Muslims? I've committed myself to a simple life in the mountains with Made, and doing business, even attempting to do business in Vietnam, really isn't a part of my commitment. But then, should I earn some money, it certainly would help, especially for Branwell. And so the dilemmas I have contemplated for at least a year has returned in all its intriguing complexities and seduction. My lost patience with Rose and told her not to trouble him any more, which he hasn't. Even when he came back, offering her what she asked for. He asked me to intervene, but I think his actions were fairly final. In any case, I don't want to endorse any deal that I myself cannot be certain about. Nevertheless, I somehow think something will happen, thanks to Rose. All of which simply reflects my positive attitude at the moment. Months later, he called me to say that there really had been some further contact with Rose, but this time it had reached a stalemate. If Branwell really does kill himself because he cannot live without me sending him $25,000 a year, is this incident partially responsible? Given the ephemeral nature of the whole episode, I should be suspecting some paranormal influence, such as Pasugian. Both conjectures are true and untrue at the same time, and it's not up to me to rise to the provocations, not least as we has 4 times as many bad thoughts as good. But I must remain calm and focus on the positive to balance such negativity. Much later, this contact asked me to loan him some money, and for the first time I refused. This is the last Westerner I knew in Indonesia who appeared to be doing well. He had a large villa, large car with a driver, and ate out every day, but it would seem that it all was rented and on borrowed money. In fact, the more I thought about it, I began to realise that I should give the money to Branwell and resolve that if it is big, then I might open a trust to ensure that Branwell was still provided for after my death. Maybe this is the real reason for all my turmoil. I'm responsible for this lost soul, and I needed to do all I could for him. Whilst you might see this windfall as undeserved, it simply reflects the 10 years of working hard and being thwarted, even ripped off at every turn. But I have learnt to be happy without money, and Branwell is clearly unable to care for himself, which appears to be an area that the British government no longer feels any responsibility towards. Anyway, that's all currently a dream, and right now I'm unable to provide for Branwell. I later heard about white monkey jobs in China, by which foreigners are given board and lodgings to endorse local areas. They're often expected to work extremely long hours without being told the true nature of their mission. I now believe this is exactly what happened to me and all whom I introduced to Rose, although our mission was a little more high-powered, involving economic and property development. This would also explain her preference for Oscar, who wore cheap pinstripe suits, which is a Vietnamese image of a Western business person, rather than my designer jackets and open-neck shirts. We started returning to Solo as an alternative to Jogja, when Hero in Jogja closed, as Maddie and Buddy rather like Lotte, and they both enjoy visiting the mall it is in, which is just like a Jakarta mall. Needless to say, I don't. On one visit I was dropped off at Puro Mangkunegaran, still the palace of Solo's second royal family, who briefly ruled a desa close to ours, surrounded by the lands of the Jogja Sultanate. The palace had a huge juggalo, the biggest in the world, which was certainly very impressive. To visit the palace, one needs to hire a guide, and mine was a kind lady from Boyolali. She pointed out numerous dance costumes to me, but her explanation made me aware that they were actually magic rituals. She also pointed out numerous black mirrors, which she said were were meditation aids, but confirming my view that the family were very much involved in magic. Pa Angbaya always wore a string of uncut rubies, which he claimed to have been given to him by the Sultan of Solo. I wonder if it was not the actual Sultan, but the head of this family. Despite the overwhelming evidence of magic being performed, like my other visits to Solo, I felt nothing, and I wandered around with an open heart. But on returning to my home, I was struck that my visit to the palace was like an exorcism, ridding us of the malevolence which may once have had a connection to Solo, which of course also means that from Uni as well as Pa Angbaya. Well, that concludes this chapter from my book, The Londo and the Green Queen's Revenge, which is my third book in the series. I do hope you've enjoyed it. I'm hoping to add further chapters about every week, and so far I've managed to do this. If you'd like to hear more from me, then please subscribe and hit the bell. That way you get notifications of when a new chapter is released. In addition, I don't seem to be working very well with these algorithms on YouTube, and my videos really aren't being promoted as they should. So if you could also hit the like button and sort of make some comments. I think that will help me to get noticed. I hate to ask you that, but I really do need more viewers. But thank you for this viewing. Thank you so much.